On this week's episode of I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, I'm interviewing two people, a board chair and a CEO. And we're going to dive a little bit into the relationship between Amanda Smith, the board chair for the Community Foundation for Brevard in Brevard County, Florida, and Theresa Grimison, the president and CEO. Please join us now as we talk to Theresa and Amanda. Hey everybody, this is Michael Corley. Just wanted to let you know we are now sending out a weekly, very brief newsletter. Tips, tricks, pointers to nonprofit executives. That includes both board members and CEOs, executive directors. If you're interested in receiving this, please go to thecorleycompany.com/newsletter and you can sign up. Once again, that's thecorleycompany.com/newsletter. Well, welcome to this week's episode of the I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members. And this is a treat for me because it's two people that I have a lot of respect for, an actual board chair for a nonprofit and the CEO of that same nonprofit. We love to talk about the dynamics of that relationship. So today we're going to dive into that a little bit. So let me ask you two to introduce yourselves. Amanda, we'll start with you, Amanda Smith, and then we'll move over to Theresa Grimison. Amanda, would you let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. My name's Amanda Smith. I am an attorney practicing in Brevard County, Florida, currently serving as the chair of the board of directors of the Community Foundation for Brevard. I'm a native Brevardian, and I think we'll get into that a little bit as we go through the questions. But I was born and raised here, came back here shortly after I graduated from law school in 2012. And just kind of personally, I am married and have two young daughters who are 4 and 6, and I have a busy and active estate planning and administration practice here in Brevard.
Well, Amanda, thank you. And the audience couldn't see me cringe when I hear 4 and 6, 2 years apart. Oh my Lord. You're a busy person for sure. Theresa, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Michael. My name is Theresa Grimison, and I'm the president and CEO of the Community Foundation for Brevard. And Brevard, Florida is over on the east coast of the state in central Florida. I came here because my husband is from this area, was raised here, and we had been in Washington, D.C. When we had the opportunity to come down. So after what I call a sabbatical year, I met my predecessor of the Community Foundation and began helping her with some strategic initiatives. And then about a year later, I had the opportunity to put my hat in the ring as the CEO. And of course, the board held a comprehensive search, and I was fortunate to be selected. But, my career background has been in nonprofit leadership and growth for pretty much my entire time in the saddle. And what I found, it relates to the Community Foundation, is that I kept what I felt like was moving upstream in terms of kind of areas of interest, started in the arts, moved into education, and then to public policy. And all of that kind of combined, plus a little bit leaning towards the business side of running a nonprofit organization, combined to make sense, for me and for the organization. But, just on a personal note, I'm so fortunate to be able to blend my professional background with my kind of personal history to leverage that against a place, that I call home for forever, and where I'm raising my 15 and 12-year-old sons. And
now I'm crazy.
Yeah, right. It's an adventure. But just I love this area, and most of all, I really love the people, which is of course what a community foundation is all about. So,
well, it certainly is. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think there's a lot in what you just said. So people who aspire to be a CEO of a community foundation, I hope you heard that. But let's go over to Amanda. So Amanda, you're busy. You've got a young family. Why did you join the Community Foundation board? And then why did you decide to move into a leadership role as chair?
Sure. So I've actually been a member of the board since 2015. I'm serving my third term as chair right now. I took over that role in 2021. Originally, a colleague introduced me to the Community Foundation. One of my prior partners was on the board and introduced me. So just kind of light involvement to start. But as I got to know the organization better, There's a lot of interplays with my professional practice, but I think more basically, as I mentioned, I'm from Brevard. Both of my parents were born and raised in Merritt Island, which is where I'm now raising my family. I love Brevard, but as a young adult, as a high school student, I couldn't wait to leave, and I thought I would never come back. It's a small place, and people, you run a stop sign, and somebody calls your mom and tells them, and I didn't like that. And so I left. I went up to Emory for college, and then I went to law school at Florida State. And when I left, I really thought I would never come back. I did not envision moving back here. But almost as soon as I was gone, I was somewhere else. I was in Atlanta, and I realized what a great place it is, and what a great place it would ultimately be to, choose to raise my family. So by the time I graduated from college, I knew eventually I would want to come back to Brevard. Went to law school, and then came back right after I took the bar. So I love Brevard. I'm glad to be raising my family here, but having lived other places, I also can see some of the areas that we could use improvement. And I can see, I can appreciate what the community foundation can do to kind of impact and drive that change. And that's something that honestly I didn't recognize when I first joined the board. But something I have come to see over time. So at some point, the governance committee did ask me to join the leadership lineup. Timing was a little bit tricky. I think I was newly pregnant with my youngest daughter at the time. So we kind of put a pause on it for a bit, but I have been in that role since 2021 and have liked being a part of those conversations to help make Brevard a place really where everybody can thrive.
Well, I think that's great. I love the comment. So many kids say, I'm never coming back to this place. And a lot of us work our way back home, don't we? So,
yeah.
So I want to get into a little bit about the dynamic. And Theresa, when Amanda became chair, so obviously you were in your role as CEO. How did you approach that and that new relationship? I mean, did you have any guidelines? How did you engage Amanda in discussion? Can you share a little bit about how you handled that transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, you learn things along the way, right? That's just life. Amanda is the third chair that I've worked with since being the CEO. And one thing that she and I talked about that we're implementing for our next transition really is engaging the vice chair or the person that's been identified as the next chair, because that's not always the same, right? That we would engage him or her in our regular meetings, et cetera, a little bit in advance of where we started, really. So it's not that just kind of that switch that happened so quickly. But when Amanda became the chair, we were mid-pandemic because she transitioned into the chair role in January of 2021, and that was just a different time for all of us. We're doing things all a little bit differently. But I think we're fortunate in that we had what I would consider a very high functioning board for quite some time. We had a strong series of chairs and great relationships going into it, really solid working committees. So, I would say it was a fairly easy transition. We just had obviously a long conversation about how do we each work best. And there probably were some adjustments. Now we've been in this together, for a little over 2 years. So it feels like it was just kind of easy and like clockwork, but I'm sure we just made some adjustments. And, it's been interesting for me because as our board has had a very strong shared vision for where we want the community foundation to go. Obviously, I mean, each person is bringing a different perspective and a slightly different approach to their leadership role. But I will say that Amanda is somebody that is so well respected all the way around the table, and can really inspire and brings people along, right? And I think that's such a key quality to have in that leadership role, and she really embodies us. So we also had, I feel like I'm going on and on, but I'll just carry on. At that moment in time for us as an organization, we were celebrating, realizing that we had achieved the goals that we had set out, that the board had set out about 5 years previously. So, Amanda stepped into the role at a time when we need to come together again and rethink and revision a bit. So that was an exciting time. And I don't know, Amanda, if you want to say anything about.
Yeah, I mean, I was a part of the board in 2016. I think I was a year in at that point when we had a strategic planning retreat, and we came up with some big goals, and we went through some big changes after that with the CEO change, and we had some lofty fundraising goals that we really had to meet to be the organization that we wanted to be for the future. And through the pandemic and Theresa and her team's tireless work, those goals were all achieved during that time period where the board wasn't doing a whole lot of active work. We were meeting via Zoom. We were not having our normal events and outreach, but the team pivoted really well and still exceeded the goals that we had set back in 2016. So as we started to kind of come out of the pandemic or adjust to the new way of life, Theresa and I decided it was time, because we had met those goals back from 2016, to convene again as a board and decide what the next 5 to 10 years would look like. And that's how we, came to know you, Michael, and we had a great session in 2022, which, if I recall correctly, we had tried to schedule for earlier, and then pandemic kept us on our toes. And so I think we did finally have that in, I think it was February of 2022. And had a great session from that, which has really given us our current goals that as an organization we're working towards.
So as y'all work together, and you have over the past number of years, how often do you all interact? Can you just talk about the structure, the rhythm that you all have, talking one-on-one, emailing? Just curious, how much time do y'all spend interacting? Theresa, I'll let you go first.
Oh, really? Okay, I was going to say, Amanda, over here.
I'll take this one if you want.
There you go. Go ahead, Amanda. It's all you.
We talk as much as we can. I mean, Theresa and I have become good friends through this. There's a high level of trust between us, and I think we bounce ideas off of each other. And so I would say we probably have a working lunch together twice a month, and there's a lot of check-ins via text or quick calls or emails about business. And it's fun to kind of brainstorm and strategize with her at a very high level. And so we're meeting often whenever we can find the time, really, to do kind of that high level planning and brainstorming, and sometimes just dreaming about what the organization can be.
So, Amanda, let me follow up on that. You are super, super busy. And yet somehow you prioritize the ability to respond to Theresa. And I know that's not the case in a lot of relationships. Is that just you're that type of person, or do you prioritize? Can you talk a little bit about your responsiveness to the CEO?
I try my very best. There are a lot of text messages from Theresa that go unread or unresponded to for multiple days, but she knows that she is always welcome and that I appreciate follow-ups, but she's great. Brevard, Michael, is challenging geographically. We're a long, narrow county, and so location can sometimes be an issue, but Theresa comes to me for lunch, which is great. I have to eat lunch every day, and so that has been our most consistent and easy to accommodate check-in. But again, we'll get together for coffee or a cocktail if we can find the time, and if not, we'll do a quick call on the way into the office, and we find the time. It's harder to find the larger blocks of time where we can talk more extensively, but Theresa always comes. I appreciate this. She always comes with a printed agenda, and it's probably more for her than it is for me, but it's so that she has the list of things that it's important for us to get through, and we get through those things as efficiently as we can.
Oh, I love that. And Theresa, so what dynamics allow for a very strong relationship between the CEO and the board chair. One of you just said trust a second ago, but what else? What helps the CEO run the organization in terms of the relationship with the board chair?
Well, I think that, I think a clear understanding of the role of the CEO and the role of the board chair, right? It's, and we're fortunate again, and I said it earlier, that we have that kind of strong practice and culture of our board, of governance. So a high level of oversight and accountability, that's set forth in our bylaws. Our chair leads the board, facilitates that group, ensures that we're hearing voices around the table, and I lead the organization. But I will say this, that, I don't feel, I feel that I like to engage with my board chair in particular, just on kind of every level of the organization, just as know this is going on. Every once in a while, I think Amanda has said, that's really your call, Theresa. And I appreciate that, right? That there's that, there is that line. But I really value having that sounding board. There are some tricky things that come up even in the management of the organization. So that clarity around our roles is important. I think we both feel that. But and in particular, community foundations, I mean, I think our entire lives, right, are about relationships and that trust, that authenticity, vulnerability, which of course gets used a lot. We talk about vulnerability a lot. It doesn't mean to be having to bear everything, but to open up and be willing to share, weaknesses around the whole organization, but also in yourself. And so having that ability to share that within obviously reason and the right ways, I think is really, really important in our relationship, but in any relationship at this level.
Very well.
Teresa's very good about telling me when there are maybe kind of issues brewing, and she doesn't always paint a rosy picture of everything, which I think has led to the level of trust that we have in each other, that I know that when I'm kind of getting a state of the union, if you will, that it is accurate and honest, and we can always improve, and even where we're meeting or exceeding our goals, and Theresa is very open and honest about that. So I would say, I think the two most important factors are both trust and respect. That I trust that I trust in what she's doing and what she's telling me, but I also respect and value her experience and her direction.
Let me ask both of you all this question, because clearly you all have a strong relationship. It's based on trust, transparency. Not every board chair and CEO has that. Amanda, before the board selected you, do you think they knew that about you? Because I worry about boards. Oh, it's just the next person in line. Let them have the role, right? But boards really need to be intentional who that next board chair is going to be. Do you?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for boards on that?
Yeah, I don't think that the board necessarily knew that about me. And I think a lot of that has come from Theresa and I making a commitment to spending time together. I think you work better with people when you know them. They don't have to be your best friend. They don't have to be your favorite person, but I think you have to know them to work well with them. And so we both made a commitment to spend time together, and it just turns out that we really like each other, which is great. I think, the way that our governance works is that the governance committee certainly values highly Theresa's recommendation on these things. And so I have to think, and I don't know, Theresa can comment on this, that Theresa at least planted that seed because she thought it could be a good working relationship. And I would say that should be important for any organization. You don't obviously want a board chair who is in the CEO's pocket, but you want somebody who the CEO is going to be able to work with. And that all presumes that you have an effective and ethical CEO.
I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well stated, Amanda. That last point, very, very important. Theresa, do you have comments on that?
Well, and I would add maybe self-aware CEO too, right?
Yes.
But we our governance committee is also well structured, I would say, and their responsibilities are well defined. And we've been really fortunate to have someone chairing our governance committee that has fantastic, tremendous experience in this realm. And so they're, of course, charged with setting the criteria for board members, and doing the full gamut of who would join us on the board, working on kind of performance and participation, et cetera. I mean, it's a very, I almost want to say subtly powerful committee and very important for our solid working, situation. And so we've been really fortunate. A woman named Elizabeth Shore, who's on our board and who's chaired that. And so she's been very much a part of these conversations and our succession planning, our leadership planning over the years. And so kudos to her too. I think, with identifying, it was definitely a group effort with Amanda being in our leading us forward at this time.
Definitely, you're demonstrating best practices, and you can see the results of that. I mean, I want to go back to something that was mentioned earlier, and that's your role. And you enjoy having strategic discussions with Theresa. How do you stay out of the weeds? How did you train yourself to stay in your lane and not get into, her swim lane?
I am not inclined to. We have a great structure. We redid our bylaws a few years ago. We have a great team. And so I trust the institutional integrity. So I'm not, and I know that that is not the case with many organizations. And so I'm grateful that that's not something that I've been concerned about during my tenure or something that I've had to keep a close watch on. But there are times, and Theresa indicated this already, where she's asked me some questions that, I can't answer because I'm not in the office. I'm not meeting with our donors. I'm not doing the day-to-day. That I think she sometimes just wants, she's got a gut on these things, and she, has some options and wants some input. I'm always happy to get my input, but also say, hey, that's really a you decision, not a board level decision.
Well, I think there's a humility aspect to a successful board chair. And you clearly have that. And that's not my decision, that's yours, even though you probably have an opinion, but the confidence and trust in your CEO. And so I think that's pretty special because not every organization has that. But, I mean, I want to go back. So you're a board member, you become board chair. Did that change the dynamics of your relationship with Theresa?
I would say that it deepened our relationship. We do, and I was vice chair for 2 years before then, and I was secretary before that. So I was already involved in leadership and had a good relationship with her. But we were not meeting nearly as frequently as we are now. So it certainly deepened the relationship. But I don't recall there being any sort of drastic overnight shift. It was just we started meeting and collaborating more often, and making a commitment to be available to each other to effectively run the organization.
Yeah, Theresa, kind of same question to you. She's your semi-boss, right? One of the board members, and now she becomes your main boss. How did that, from your perspective, change things, or did it?
Yeah, I would echo what Amanda just said. I felt that I knew her quite well, as she ascended into the chair role. Certainly we know each other much better now, just given our time together and our commitment both to each other, but to the organization and what we're trying to do. It's grittier, right? Because we just know more. And also, I've actually just over the last 6 months gone through some really difficult moments with my family of origin, and Amanda has been such a resource and a guide and counselor for me through that, and we've gotten, quite a ways through that, but wow, what a what an amazing friend and mentor through that, and how lucky am I to have that kind of relationship. So
I think that's important to say. I'm glad you shared that, Theresa, because we board members, those of us that are board members, CEOs are on an island. There's really, yes, they report to the board, but man, they are really on an island. It's tough to find people to speak with and to support them. And then as a board member, that's our role. Our role is to support the CEO so he or she can be successful. So I appreciate you saying that. And Amanda, when it comes to managing the board, so I love how you moved up from secretary to vice chair to chair. So that certainly positioned you nicely to manage the board. How do you manage your board? How frequently do you talk to board members? How does that look?
Yeah, so we have a number of committees, and I would say the real work is done at the committee levels for the board. Our board, we meet quarterly as a board, and the board meetings last about an hour. So we don't have a whole lot to discuss usually, because so much is being done behind the scenes or outside of board meetings by the staff and by the committees. And so I am available to all directors at any time. But it's nice because there is this division of labor which respects the board members' both time and expertise. So we are largely a board of professional advisors and or donors or other people who are, invested in the community foundation. And our governance committee does a very good job of identifying people's interests and their strengths, and then placing them on committees that align with that. And so the real day-to-day, more time-intensive work is done at the committee level. So I trust the work of those committees. I've served not all of them, but almost all of them. And as chair, I don't get into the weeds of all of those committees, but I think it really helps to utilize people's strengths and their interests where they're needed. And again, as a professional who is asked on a regular basis to serve on boards, I usually cringe when I'm asked that question, and I'm kind of lamenting that my time on the Community Foundation board is starting to sunset, because it is something where I feel like I can use my strengths and my interests. It's not when time is requested of me, it's meaningful time. It's not just sitting and then multiple hours long board meeting every month. And so I really appreciate that. And I think it makes the whole organization more effective because of the way that it's set up.
I think you just highlighted the importance of having the appropriate board and recruiting the appropriate board members for that committee structure to work. For you all to only meet quarterly, wow, I think most organizations be going, oh, I could only dream of that. So Theresa, when it comes to recruiting new board members, how does the Community Foundation Brevard look and seek new board members?
Great question. I have actually so many thoughts right now that I have on follow-up from some of our other streams of conversation. I'm like, it all wants to come out, but to stick on this one, we have a couple of tools, and of course we've got this very active committee structure, and we do empower everyone to keep their eyes and ears open, and introduce us to folks that they know, no matter whether they're on the, if they're on the governance committee or not. But we have a couple of tools that we use. One, it looks a little bit like a spider web, that makes sure that we're looking at skills, backgrounds, communities. It helps to show us where we might have gaps. So that's been very effective. And then we also have a chart that kind of lays out our terms and leadership roles, et cetera, so we can really proactively think about our succession and our leaders, and to make the appropriate moves and have the right conversations at the right time. And, what I have learned, in doing this now for a number of years and through some transitions, that my natural inclination is to wait, but that's the wrong move. And a number of my chairs have been, have said, let's have lately, right? Like we have elevated the conversation. I appreciate that, because it all does seem to take a little longer than what I wanted to, and so that's good. So we get a little started a little earlier. And And I just, I have to emphasize that us, the chair and the CEO, and of course that there are other individuals really planning that leadership pipeline all the way around.
And so it's very strategic and very intentional. It sounds like you never stop. Now, of course, it increases in importance, but I think that's very noteworthy because a lot of organizations, it's only, oh, good Lord, we got a seat coming up in 3 months. We better start the work. And that's really not effective. That puts you behind the 8 ball. Right.
And, relating to the conversation that we had before about how Amanda and I work together, this but also relates to this. And I think it actually relates to the whole, kit and caboodle is that saying that change happens at the speed of trust, right? And so I think about investment happens at the speed of trust. And so many things happen at that speed, and it takes time to develop trust because it's true relationships, right? And you can accelerate a relationship, sure. I think we've all done that. But nothing beats that slow and steady practice of, getting to know your partners and moving that forward. So,
well stated. So let me ask 2 final questions, one of each of you, and then we can go in whichever direction. So Amanda, a new chair, time's coming. A lot of y'all don't roll over chairs on July 1st, but a number of organizations do. What advice would you have for an incoming board chair of a nonprofit?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, building on a theme that we've talked about a lot, which is relationship and trust, is developing a relationship with the CEO that can grow over time. But eyeing a transition in the near term, I think is also, it would also be important to download with the current chair, the outgoing chair, who in many organizations is going to stay involved at least for a year. But I think Theresa suggested at the beginning, and we've talked about implementing this too, is having, we will have a transition in January, is having our vice chair start to join in our regular meetings so that it's not on January 1st, Amanda leaves and new chair steps in, that we're kind of working collaboratively for, the last 6 months or so of my term. So I think that will help the wind up once a new chair transitions in. If there's been a close we're collaborating with the whole board and of course the vice chair all the time and on an ongoing nature, but bringing them into that more intimate, intense, personal relationship earlier, so that there's a smoother transition, I think would be very wise. And make sure that you know and you understand and you bought into the vision, and that your next chair is in that same boat, that they have the same vision and that they're carrying that forward. And we feel very good about that because we all worked together, a year and a half ago to set that vision for the next 5 years.
And Theresa, same question to you, but obviously shoes on the other foot. What advice would you give to a tenured CEO that is welcoming a new board chair?
I think it's, quickly building that productive relationship, of course, and we've talked about that quite a bit, but also, it's important to establish your credibility as a CEO, whether you're the new CEO or even if you've been doing it for 6 years, right? Which is where I'm at, but, business, the results really speak for themselves, but I think it's super important as the CEO to, recognize the team accomplishment that the success is, right? That this wouldn't happen. I've been super fortunate to be in the role that I've been in, and have the experience I have to bring to bear, but maintaining that humility and elevating the others around me is it's key for me. And I think it's key for others. The other thing that I think about a lot as I'm getting to know each chair, but also each board member, right, are just appreciating the different skills and interests that people bring, and that they offer insights and perspectives oftentimes in ways that I wasn't expecting, and really being able to appreciate that, even if it's challenging, And, I think Amanda said it earlier, right? This like that getting in face to face, really spending the time with each other is just super important.
I think those are very wise words from a maturing CEO for those of you who are listening. And it's recognizing that every board member has something to offer it and being humble enough and intentional enough to find out what it is. You don't have to have all the answers as CEO. And I think a lot of us, we move into that leadership role. We think we gotta know everything. And the fact is you really don't. So Theresa, I appreciate you sharing that. So let me ask you, as we're wrapping things up, and this is the first time we've ever had two people interviewed at the same time. I think it's gone very, very well. Any last words? And Theresa, you said you had so many ideas and comments. So anything you want to comment on, and then we'll go over to Amanda.
Well, I managed to squeeze it in my earlier.
Oh, look at you. Very good.
Earlier moment. But just to, on the theme that we've just gone down, I love Leonard Cohen to the horror of a close friend of mine, the singer-songwriter, and he has a famous song, obviously, about letting the light in. The light only comes into the cracks, right? So I think about that a lot, and both as as a board, the organization, as a CEO, and so I get a lot of inspiration from that.
Oh, that's great. And Amanda?
I think that's a great place to end. I have loved the opportunity to serve with Theresa. I don't know that I fully knew what I was getting into on the front end, but it's been a positive and impactful and meaningful experience.
I would love to have Amanda stay as chair for,
we already did that once.
as much as possible.
Right.
I will say that I do think it's healthy for an organization to obviously transition in its chair role. But we've gotten this bonus year. But I think in some of I have seen challenges in my past lives in different organizations where if you didn't have that transition, there can be fantastic, it can be amazing, and it can also lead to some challenges. So, words from the road, right? Like,
yeah, I agree.
It's healthy.
Yeah, it's really it's a functionally dysfunctional system. The fact that you've got a board chair, if things are going great, it's awesome, but it's going to come to an end. And then if you've got a bad one, oh good gosh, it's gonna drag. It's horrible, and I've seen it too many times.
Well, there's also things that you can't predict, right? That happen and that bubble up, and also when you have that transition, it does give other people the chance to also share their leadership.
Yeah.
Others, right? So
good point.
Good and healthy. Yeah. But I would, just for the record, Amanda, keep you. Possibly good.
Well, after 2 years in this relationship, they're still smiling at each other. For those of you who are listening, and I know both of them very well. Theresa a little bit better than Amanda, and they're just two wonderful people. And what you're doing in that community over there is just upstanding. So I commend you, and I commend how you're operating the board and operating the organization. You really do have your sea legs under you, and you two are a strong reason for that. Theresa Grimison, CEO of the Community Foundation for Brevard, and Amanda Smith, Board Chair for Community Foundation for Brevard. Thank you both for joining us today on the I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, we were just laughing because we always do a post-discussion with our guests, and I tell you what, Amanda and Theresa are they're just absolutely wonderful people. But here we are recapping with Reed. Reed, as he listened throughout the podcast, he's identified 3 key nuggets he'd like to share with the audience. Reed, I'll turn it over to you.
So Theresa's dynamics that allowed for a strong relationship between the chair and CEO were that they both have a clear understanding of their roles, and they have built trust and respect between each other, and that is the 2 biggest factors that went into their relationship.
Boy, you hit the nail on the head, and I've seen when that is so clear and works, and I've seen when it isn't. Boy, it sure is painful. Number 2, Reed.
That their relationship grew because of intentionality. They were intentional with the growth. It did not happen by accident. They made sure to set up times and to meet frequently, and it did not happen by accident.
Yeah, relationships don't just grow. There's got to be some intentionality behind it. I think they really covered that nicely. And Reed, number 3.
Amanda's advice for a new board chair is to have a download with the outgoing chair. Bring that next chair into the board chair CEO meetings months prior to them stepping into their role as board chair, and then to make sure that that next board chair understands the vision and is able to carry that vision on throughout their term as board chair.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, recapping with Reed, the 3 key points he observed in the podcast with Theresa and Amanda. Reed, thank you. And thanks to everybody who's listened to this week's episode of the I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members.